Hello, I'm Nan Simonson, and I wrote Aging Powerfully. My book is about aging from whatever place you find yourself now, powerfully, physically, emotionally, mentally, and especially with purpose, driving you forward to the next 1, 2, 3, in some cases 5 or 6 decades. At almost 72, I'm looking at the next 1, 2, 3 decades with excitement because I see, with health as my ally, the possibility of living an entire, almost lifetime in good health and seeing the future as something I'm excited about rather than fearing. And unfortunately, with chronic illness and chronic diseases growing in number in America, starting at earlier and earlier ages, where do you find children with type 2 diabetes? In America, and it's because of the way we eat. And we're going to talk about one bit of that today because I work with, well, let me back up. I'm a health and wellness coach, a plant-based diet expert. I'm a member of the College of Lifestyle Medicine. I am a health coach with one of the founding members of the College of Lifestyle Medicine, and that is Dr. Wayne Dysinger, and I am the health coach for his practice and have been for almost 4 years. And this month makes 4 years of my being whole food plant-based, meaning I gave up all animal products. Actually, it took a couple of months, probably until the beginning of the next year, but this was the month that I began my training and my experience with whole food plant-based eating, and that means no animal product at all, which means no butter and cream and milk, as well as cheese and meat and fish and poultry and any animal product. And I'm healthier than I was before, and well, in many ways healthier than probably ever, because I gave all that up. And I talk a little bit about my experience with an eating disorder that I had most of my life, and I gave that up too, a little more than 4 years ago. So I feel blessed. So what am I talking about today? The title of this video is 4 reasons I don't eat oil. And the reason I did this is because in my conversations with patients and clients about a whole food plant-based dietary regime, and some people are all in as I am, plant exclusive. Some people have many meals a week, many days a week that are whole food plant-based, and they have some animal product once in a while. They will still have some pizza with cheese, or they'll have, oh, I don't know, dinner out and have a steak or chicken. The closer you can get to filling your body with plants, the healthier you'll be. So to whatever degree that is, it makes sense. But one of the things that we talk about all the time is a concept of SOS free, salt, oil, sugar free. Now that's about as stringent as you can get. And my friend, Chef AJ, whom I learned a lot from even in the beginning as to how to eat well, really well, whole food plant-based with delicious foods, she embraces the SOS dietary constriction of whole food that is plant exclusive. SOS free means no oil, well, no salt, oil, or sugar. I am not exclusive with salt. I put a little bit of salt in things. That would be a restriction if, for example, I had cardiovascular disease, or if when I salted food I couldn't stop eating it. And there are situations where people have to do it even for that reason. I don't use sugar because refined sugar is a trigger for me, and quite frankly, refined sugar is a a trigger for most people. It's dopaminergic, meaning that it causes the release in our body of, it hits dopamine receptors, causes the release of dopamine in our brain. And dopamine is not just a reward neurotransmitter, but it's a driver of action. And a lot of people, as a matter of fact, I just had a conversation with a client today who said, I can't give up sugar. I love sugar. It fuels me. Well, of course it does. There have been studies that rats would rather give up cocaine than give up sugar, because it's that strong on our neurotransmitters. So yeah, sugar's a hard one. I don't want to play around with it. Does it mean I eat no sweets? Oh, I eat plenty of sweets. I don't go out of my way to eat a lot of sweets because, quite frankly, the more sweets of any prepared in any way that you eat, the more you're going to want. And so I find that, and so I have sweets as a treat. But how do I sweeten my things? I use fruit to sweeten, whole fruit. For example, date paste, which is dates soaked and ground up in a food processor, and then I keep it in the freezer, and I keep it a little jar in the refrigerator. I make things out of date paste. I just made some muffins. If you go to my YouTube channel, YouTube Nan Simonson, and I put a space between Nan and Simonson, and it seems to get you there easier, or my website, nansimonson.com. You'll see a recipe for oat apple breakfast muffins that don't even use the date paste. There is nothing in those except grated apple and or shredded apple and oats and bananas, super ripe bananas. You know how you buy a bunch of bananas and you get some that get really dark? That's what I covet. I've got a bunch right now. I'm waiting to I sit and watch them get dark, because then I peel them and put them in the freezer. And 4 of those went into these muffins. And they are so delicious. And yet there's not a drop of any sweetener other than fruit. Does that make a difference? Yes. Fruit is nature's candy, but in the package that has to be broken apart, literally broken apart in our body, it doesn't hit that receptor that a refined sugar would. I'm way off track. Okay, get back to oil now. For reasons I don't eat oil. So that's why I don't eat sugar. All right, but I also don't eat oil. Why? That's what I'm here to tell you about. Okay, I'm going to start with the health reasons. I'm going to start with people that I follow, that I trust, and I'm going to start with the science. For example, way back in the 80s, Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn found that he could reverse heart disease, reverse it. Nobody could make that claim, and Dean Ornish found the same thing in California that Dr. Esselstyn found at the Cleveland Clinic, and that was that he could open up those reduced or crimped or clogged arteries by putting patients on a strict plant-based diet, SOS-free. The oil in our blood will cause a damage to the endothelial cells, and I'm quoting him, that will cause a reduction in nitric oxide that creates a more friction. I'm just saying this in very simplistic terms. As the blood goes through the veins, instead of, as he says, going through like Teflon, they go through like Velcro if you don't have enough nitric oxide. And that's where you'll start getting problems with plaques and deposits of cholesterol. And that's one of the reasons, even if it's not a saturated fat, he says, if you are dealing with cardiovascular disease, not a drop of oil in your diet, and you'll be able to live as if you didn't have it. Whereas for most people, that diagnosis of cardiovascular disease, although they are stented, bypassed, medicated, science has shown, research has shown, the numbers have shown that in many cases they are not giving themselves a longer life, because ultimately what they've bypassed or stented is still represented in the rest of their body. So I listen to what Dr. Esselstyn says. I also listen to Dr. Cyrus Kambata, who is a specialist. He's a PhD, not MD, on diabetes, because this young, energetic um, 20-year-old, 22-year-old got a triple whammy in his 20s when he was told you have three autoimmune diseases. One is alopecia, which meant he lost all the hair, his skin discolored, he lost all the hair on his face, his eyebrows, all of that. He had that. He had Hashimoto's thyroiditis, so he had a thyroid problem. And he also had type 1 diabetes, which means that the pancreas no longer has the beta cells to create insulin, and that is irreversible. Now, people with type 1 can live better if they know how, and that's what he teaches people to do. Rather than volumes of insulin, he teaches people with type 1 diabetes, or 1.5, which is usually a later onset of diabetes where the pancreas isn't completely kaput. He helps people with that, and he helps people with type 2 diabetes in his book, Mastering Diabetes. He also says, keep the oil out of the diet, especially the saturated fat. He recommends to his patients 100% whole food, plant-based, and keeping the saturated fat out, which means keeping, for example, coconut oil out, because coconut oil is 92% saturated fat. So in that way, our bodies can be, we can prevent the chronic illnesses that we're seeing across the board in America. The number one is cardiovascular disease. Then we have cancer. And what about cancer? Oh, then we have diabetes, we have cancer. Well, I've addressed diabetes, I've addressed cardiovascular disease. Dr. Kristi Funk, breast surgeon of the stars, who, if you're dealing with breast cancer, you're dealing with prostate cancer, a lot of that is estrogen driven, but you also are dealing with other cancers. And flat out, she says, keep the oil out of your diet. Go whole food, plant-based, plant exclusive, and keep the oil out of your diet, because again, it shows up in your blood and makes your blood less oxygenating of your cells as well as your organs. So I look at that and I say, okay, do I need oil in my diet? Absolutely not. Then I'll go to number 2. Omega-3 fatty acids, as well as omega-6 fatty acids, are essential fatty acids. We can't get them. We don't produce them in our body. And we need to have foods that give us those fatty acids. Well, as a vegan in philosophy as well as in what I eat, but I'm very careful to say whole food, plant-based, because there are plenty of vegans who actually make themselves sick eating a strict vegan diet, but of junk food, of processed vegan foods, and they may be sicker than those that have some fish once in a while. So whole food, plant-based is what I am referring to. I don't eat fish. Yes, fish would be fine, especially the fatty, oily fish, not the big guys like the swordfish and the tuna, because they accumulate mercury. Maybe the salmon. The problem is our oceans are garbage, and even the salmon have been shown to have massive amounts of microplastics and dioxins, especially the ones that are farmed. And if you see Alaskan salmon, that's a farmed salmon. You have to get wild salmon for that. But I don't even do that, because I really don't want them to kill those fish for me. I would rather get my omega-3s from plant foods, and absolutely you can do that. You can get it from seeds. The highest in omega-3s are the flax seeds and the chia seeds. Hemp to a degree, but hemp is pretty heavy on the 6s. And you can get it from, and what you're getting is a linoleic acid that is converted to DHA and EPA, which are the useful forms in our body of the omega-3s. But we can get that from walnuts. That's the highest in the nuts, as well as the seeds. But we can also get our omega-3s in plants. Leafy greens, for example. So I stay away from the animal products, but here's the challenge, and this is why I don't use oil. The plant oils are loaded with omega-6, and we get oils in almost 99% of the processed foods that people eat, and quite frankly, Americans are eating 65% of their diet with processed foods. That makes up the base of their diet, 65 to 70% processed foods. Another 25 to 30% is animal product, and a teeny little sliver in there is plant foods. And quite often those plant foods are ketchup and French fries, or fried zucchinis, because people just love the fried foods. Well, what's the problem with that? All those oils, everything you buy, even if it says healthy, whole food, what are some of the examples? We see them, oh my gosh, I see the baskets full of this stuff at Costco, because it looks like, if you read the front of a package, it looks like you're doing the right thing. Oh, beet chips, or vegetable chips, or freeze-dried sugar snap peas. Wow, that sounds like it should be perfect, right? Turn the package around and look at the amount of oil in there. Even seaweed, and I still get those little teeny packages of seaweed. I get the ones with the least amount of oil, because they feel that they've got to put oil in the seaweed too. I use the seaweed because I want some iodine, so I use the ones that have the least amount of oil, and it's like about 2 grams. I found one with 1 gram and I couldn't find it again, but anyway. So does it mean that I never touch anything with oil? I just said I use the seaweed that way. But I'm very aware of what I'm about to say, and that is the ratio, the 3s to the 6s. The omega-3s are especially not only antioxidant, but anti-inflammatory. What do these essential fatty acids do? Everything at a cellular level. They affect us, they affect our muscles, they affect our joints, they affect our eyes, they affect our brain, they affect our nervous system, which means that they also help protect us from chronic diseases, because our organs are all part of what they affect, and nothing else replaces them in terms of importance. It's very important that we have our omega-3s. We used to get them not only from fish, but also from meat as well. But trouble is, you get the saturated fat from the meat, which gives you problems in a lot of other ways. And as Cyrus Khambatta explains, if you either read his book or simply Google Cyrus Khambatta and listen to one of his podcasts, Caldwell Esselstyn, Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, surgeon, and listen to one of his podcasts, Kristi Funk, Dr. Kristi Funk, and listen to her podcasts, you'll hear the descriptions of this, or you can read their books. Cyrus Khambatta's is Mastering Diabetes. Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn's seminal work is Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease, and then Dr. Kristi Funk is, except I don't know that I'd recommend this. She wrote it almost 18 years ago, and it's called Breasts, the Owner's Manual. Isn't that great for a breast surgeon? But she debunks a lot of what she says after she wrote that, because even she will admit, I was wrong. When I wrote that, I said stay away from soy. Now I've learned enough to know that soy is so preventative of prostate as well as breast cancer that I recommend 1 to 3 servings a day, not only for prevention initially, but also for patients whom I have removed breast tissue because of cancer. I will still say protect yourself with tofu and with a strict whole food plant-based SOS free diet. Interesting. She put her whole, and no, she's not SOS free, but she is low if no oil, low if no sugar, and she uses some salt. Okay, so back to the omega 3s. The ideal combination ratio of omega 3 to omega 6 is a 1 to 1. I'll just say omega 6 to omega 3 is a 1 to 1. They work well that way. And the same enzyme that breaks down 6 breaks down 3, but is preferential to the 6, which is interesting because that one in excess becomes inflammatory. Okay, so remember that. So you have, unfortunately, far fewer things that have your omega 3s. We've got some fish, we've got some meat. Well, the thing with meat is that it is raised in such a horrendous way now. And well, I'm not going to get into all of that, but the meats are deficient in things they used to be plentiful in. So we'll just leave it at the fish, which if you don't use it, then you're using the whole plant food omega-3 precursors, which I've mentioned, the seeds and the nuts. But omega-6s are in everything because they're in plant oils. Well, everything we buy that's a packaged food, almost everything, has oils in it. Turn every package around. Carbohydrates and protein are 4 calories a gram. Fat is 9 calories a gram. More than double. So you're not only getting a lot more calories, but it's usually the first thing shown on a label. So the label will say to you, let's say I'll use the example of the seaweed. It's 30 calories for the package. It has 2 grams of fat. What is that, 18 calories? What is that? More than 50% of what I'm eating then is fat. Now that's not such a big deal if we're only talking about 2 grams. And that's why I'd encourage you to listen to Dr. Cyrus Kambata's interview. There's a really good one, and it's the doctor of making diabetes disappear. There's a YouTube video of Dr. Kambata and Rip Esselstyn, who is Caldwell Esselstyn's son, and has become huge in the whole food plant-based space with a company called Plant Strong. And he interviewed him, and man, it's a long interview, but there is so much excellent information there that breaks down exactly what happens in your body as it relates to insulin resistance, metabolism of sugar, and he makes it very clear that the culprit in diabetes is not the sugar, it's the fats, and especially the excessive saturated fats, which we get from all animal products, and excessive plant fats, because the plant fats have omega-6s primarily. So I have a lot of plant oil in everything I buy. I don't mean me, I just mean I'm projecting. So we have plant oil in just about everything we buy. Just about, more than 50% of what people eat is manufactured. What does that mean? That in almost everything they're eating, including their home cooking, oil, look at just about any recipe book. They will tell you to start with 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 tablespoons of, it doesn't even matter what kind of oil, even olive oil is 14% saturated fat. So if I use olive oil now, I just don't. I just don't. Not in my salad dressings, not in my anythings. And you don't have to, and I'll get to that in a minute. But so if you're getting oil in everything, what does your ratio look like? That ratio, that all-important ratio between 3s and 6s, you've got, ideal is 1 to 1. Not so ideal, but workable is maybe 3 to 1. 3 6s to 1 omega-3 ratio. But the average American has a 20 to 30 to 1 ratio because of the use of exogenous oils, plant oils, and the use of processed foods. You don't buy restaurant food, fast food, packaged food, as I said, except for maybe a 1% exception, without having those plant oils in there, and quite often several of them. And so you can't get away from that, which means that every time you eat those foods with that oil, you are reducing the effect of omega-3 in your body, because your enzymes are going to go straight to the 6s, and the 3s are going to be waiting around to be assimilated. Okay, that's about as easily as I can put this. And that is another reason, number 2, that I don't use oil. Why would I? I want my 3s to be rallying behind me health-wise. And I want to be as healthy as I can be, and I can do that by keeping the 6s at bay, omega-6s, and keeping my 3s strong. And rather than trying to eat more omega-3, which I already do, why don't I just cut back the 6s, and that's how I'll get my ratio. Doesn't that make sense? It's logical. And then number 3, caloric density. When I began eating whole foods that were plant-based, I learned that I could eat more and weigh less. I never would have guessed that. I thought if I ate more, I would weigh more. But without even meaning to, even though my weight was good when I began a whole food plant-based diet, I still went down 5 pounds or so without even meaning to, and I just maintained that. My husband did the same thing. He's actually 10 pounds less than when we were not eating whole food plant-based, and yet we eat really large volumes of delicious food. That's the other thing that I wish I had more power to express that message, that what you give up, what I gave up in flavor of foods I loved. I loved fried chicken. I loved scrambled eggs loaded with cheese. I loved a patty melt, but those foods were killing me. That's why I changed. I saw that my health was going down the rabbit hole, the way most Americans were. And when I was sent to all those doctors, the rheumatologist because of rheumatoid arthritis, the cardiologist because of sky-high cholesterol, the endocrinologist because I was pre-diabetic. You hear what I'm saying? my autoimmune diseases, had 3 of them. They pop up when your body's kind of out of balance. Every one of those doctors, the rheumatologist, wanted to give me immunosuppressants, and then statins from the cardiologists, and then pills for the pre-diabetes, and it just went on, and every one of them said, you'll take these for the rest of your life. And I said, oh no, I won't, because you can't show me a person who's been on those pills who doesn't have a bag that keeps growing and growing full of pills, because one pill follows another. And are they well? No, they're still doing the stuff that has hurt their bodies. They're just getting away with it because of the pills sort of masking symptoms. Anyway, there, I've said all that. And so what I'll say then is that there's something called caloric density. And this is what comes into play when we switch from animal products that are 800 to 1,000 to 1,200 calories to 1,500 calories a pound, depending on the amount of fat in that particular flesh. The same thing with eggs, the same thing with cheese, which is way up there at 2,000, 2,500 calories a pound. Oil, 4,000 calories a pound. So I'll show you my chart. Okay, that red line is the difference between the lower calorie density foods, they're right over here, and the higher calorie density foods. If one eats, I can't do this backwards, if one eats if I'm looking at my chart, it's to the left of the red line. And you can Google caloric density and you'll find charts similar to this. This one is Chef AJ's, Kim Novak, who is a very highly esteemed dietitian, came up with his own chart, but they're all the same. What it says is from 0 to 6, almost 0 to 600 calories, you can eat any plant-based food in this description. The greens, vegetables, leafy greens, vegetables, starchy vegetables, potatoes, rice, legumes, fruit of every kind. And you can eat as much of that as you want to satiety, and you will still maintain your weight. If you add to that the foods that have more fat that are still whole food, that are plant-based, such as avocados, you're pulling that over the red line, because those foods are all 600 calories a pound or less. We can only eat anywhere from 3 to 5 pounds of food a day. And so you can eat to satiety, make combinations of absolutely fabulous meals, and still be at that less than 600 calories a pound on the average. And if you're over the 600, 750 avocado, I just take a little avocado and I'm fine with it, even though once in a while I'll have guacamole on baked chips. But I know that I can't do that every day, all day long. Now my husband can, because he's a bigger guy, he has bigger muscles, and he can burn through those. And so every day he has a whole avocado on toast and makes a huge sandwich out of that. Seeds and nuts, they're way up at the higher levels of caloric density, 2,800 calories a pound. So do I eat seeds and nuts? Sure I do. I eat those walnuts for omega-3s. I eat the flax. I eat the chias. But I'm not eating pounds of them. It's an ounce of walnuts. It's a couple of tablespoons of chia and flax mixed together. I get my omega-3s, and those stay on that side of the red line. So that is caloric density. What does that mean to you? What does that mean to me? That means that I can create meals that take from one side. For example, I'll put tahini in my salad dressing. I never use oil in salad dressings. And if you go to nansimonson.com and look at recipes, if you go to my YouTube channel, Nan Simonson at YouTube, and look at my recipes, you'll see that I have lots of fat from tahini. There might be some avocado. There might be nuts in there. My favorite mashed potatoes are a little more than half potato, a little less than half cauliflower, with a creamy kind of a sauce that you whip into it made of cashews. And it is, everybody who has them thinks they are the best mashed potatoes, and yet by the same token the caloric density is rather low because of the combination with the cauliflower, and yet the fat kind of brings it up a little bit. But they are absolutely a green light food. Go for it, because I can eat a half a pound, 3/4 of a pound of it, and I have a nice big bowl of it with sauteed mushrooms, and I've got a perfect meal. And then some greens and some salad and maybe an oat muffin. Okay, now I said something and you probably caught that. What about those sauteed mushrooms? What are you talking about? That's the last part I wanted to mention about the reasons I don't use oil, and that's number 4. I don't have to use oil, and that's what you'll see in every one of my recipes. Again, when you go to most cookbooks, they'll start out with 1 to 2 to 5 to 4 to 3 for every single recipe. Oil, oil, oil. Oil, first of all, high in the 6s, don't want that. High in calories. 1 tablespoon of oil is 120 calories. You don't taste that tablespoon of oil. You don't have to cook with that tablespoon of oil, because, for example, most recipes will start with the oil in the pan, and then you put down the onions, and then you put down the garlic, and then you put in some spices, for example, if it's Middle Eastern or Indian, so that the spices can toast, and for example, your cumin or your fenugreek or your garam masala or your curries. You're going to do that to kind of toast it and bring out the flavor. You don't have to do that with oil. I don't ever do it with oil. You'll see how I cook with just broth. I start off by browning those onions because they have so much moisture. They start to caramelize in that medium heat pan. Then they get more and more brown. Then I add the garlic and I add a little bit of broth and it browns up and browns up. Watch the recipes or watch the videos and you'll see one food after another after another. What about the baked goods? There's never oil or egg in my baked goods, and yet they're delicious. They're dense and they're moist and they're sweet if they're supposed to be. I make a flatbread of nothing but oats and water. That's delicious, so that I can make these little sandwiches. And I complicate things by having to go gluten-free. So I have to even have things that are a gluten-free kind of a bread, which makes it a little more challenging. But all of that is workable. So I want to prevent disease. I'm not going to have oil. I want to build my cellular health from the bottom up. My omega-3s are going to be taken care of because I'm not going to water down the effect with omega-6 fatty acids from plant oils and from processed foods and from, from those foods primarily. I am going to honor caloric density, and that is I'm going to eat lots and lots of food. Eat more, weigh less, and still stay slim easily. And I feel so badly because how many people that do we know that every year just get larger and larger, and they're not acting badly or abusing food. They're just eating like most Americans do. And the caloric density of processed foods is hidden, it's high, and it's addictive. The more you eat, the more you want, the more salt, oil, sugar in those foods, the higher the caloric density, the more you want them, and it just becomes a vicious cycle. I don't want any part of that. Give me absolutely delicious food, prepared beautifully without those components where you really taste the food. When there's no oil coating your tongue, you taste the food perfectly. It's exquisite. And every meal, I just had my oats this morning, and I do savory oats with shiitake mushroom and oat groats and nutritional yeast and greens, and what a breakfast. I did a run this morning and I came home and I had that, and I couldn't feel more satisfied. But it takes a while, and this is the but, big but, it takes a while to neuroadapt. It takes a while to neuroadapt from massive amounts of salt. It takes a while to neuroadapt to food that doesn't hit you upside the head, light up your brain like the sugar did those rats that would rather have the sugar than the cocaine. It takes a while to neuroadapt, and you do. The more you eat foods that are simple and clean and whole food as close to nature as possible, as close to grown as possible, the more you can't wait to take a bite of an apple or a mandarin or an Asian pear or a banana or a radish. Oh my gosh, radishes are so delicious if you aren't so used to foods that are, I'll say packaged and manufactured to make you want more and not to be able to stop. So honor caloric density, understand it, and life becomes a lot easier, and maintaining a lower weight, a good weight, a healthy weight becomes easier. And is that important? Yes. It's not a matter of judgment on looks. It's a matter of our body working better when there's not a lot of exogenous fat, which leads to insulin resistance, which then leads to tendencies toward diabetes. No thanks. I don't want that. I was close and I escaped it. I'm not going back there. And then finally, I don't need to. You don't need to put oil in every recipe all day long, everything you eat out, every fast food that puts on pounds and pounds that you don't even understand where they're coming from. It's all hidden. The flavor would have been just fine without them, but it's one more thing that hooks us. And that's all I have to say. Well, I hope this was helpful. I want to recommend that if you want to understand more about it, you at least look at these experts that I mentioned. These are contemporary people who are giving a dependable message. The College of Lifestyle Medicine, the World Health Organization, the American College of Cardiology, all of them are recommending that we look at whole food plant-based as the way to nourish our bodies and to keep the oils out of our diet, keep the sugar out, keep the salt at a low, low level. And instead of looking at, as I started this with, our coming decades. I know you want to say coming years. You can't help it. They're going to be decades before you know it. I mean, at almost 72, I think, just like every other old person thinks, where the heck did this all go? But man, if I've got another 1, 2, or 3 decades, in other words, 10, 20, or 30 years, by doing what I'm doing that works so darn well and is so worthwhile and is so delicious and is so much fun, I can ride for miles on my bike. I can run. I'm going to be doing a half marathon in 3 weeks. Who does that when you get to this age if you don't take care of yourself? Is that a reward? Oh, yeah. You play with your grandkids. You watch them graduate. You watch them have babies. Doesn't get better than that. Have a great day, because I know I'm going to. Bye-bye.